Good morning, you're watching Daybreak live on A News, and I'm here to take you through the day's top stories. So let's take a look at the morning headlines. US President Donald Trump says Iran's ceasefire is on a massive life support after Washington rejects Tehran deal. UK leader Keir Starmer fights to stay in office as lawmakers urge him to resign. And the last passengers leave hantavirus hit cruise ship as 3 more test positive. First this morning, the fragile ceasefire between Washington and Tehran is tonight on life support. President Donald Trump has said and flatly rejected Iran's latest peace proposal as the White House increases economic pressure and reports emerge of a widening regional shadow war. Let's take a look at this report.
A new diplomatic crisis is unfolding between the United States and Iran after President Donald Trump warned that efforts to secure a ceasefire are now hanging by a thread. From the Oval Office, Trump delivered some of his strongest remarks yet against Tehran, describing Iran's latest response to Washington's peace proposal as garbage and signaling a return to a maximum pressure campaign.
It's unbelievably weak, I would say. I would call it the weakest right now. After reading that piece of garbage they sent us, I didn't even finish reading it. They said, I'm not going to waste my time reading it. I would say it's one of the weakest right now. It's on life support. They understand. These are all medical people. Dr. Oz, life support is not a good thing. Do you agree?
Diagnostic.
I would say the ceasefire is on massive life support, where the doctor walks in and says, sir, your loved one has approximately a 1% chance of living.
Central to the deadlock remains Washington's demand for the total dismantling of Iran's nuclear infrastructure, a point the president insists is non-negotiable for global security.
Very simple. Iran cannot have a nuclear weapon. They can't have it. And if they did have it, the Middle East would be gone, Israel would be gone, and then hit Europe probably next. We're doing the service to the world.
In Tehran, the rhetoric is equally uncompromising. The Iranian Foreign Ministry maintains that its proposals are the only viable path to regional stability, accusing the US of being captive to Israeli interests.
Regrettably, the United States still insists on one-sided views and unreasonable demands, which are largely based on mindsets influenced by Israel.
As diplomacy falters, the US Treasury has announced fresh sanctions against 12 individuals and entities spanning Hong Kong, the UAE, and Oman. The move targets the IRGC's shadow fleet used to ship oil to China. Adding fuel to the fire, new reports suggest the conflict has already expanded. Investigative reports claim the UAE secretly struck an Iranian refinery on Levan Island in April, leading to massive Iranian retaliatory strikes on Emirati infrastructure. With tensions affecting maritime routes and US naval forces on alert, attention now turns to President Trump's upcoming meeting with Chinese leader Xi Jinping, where Washington is expected to press Beijing on energy ties with Tehran.
Now let's take a look at the stories shaping the day, and we head first over to the UK Guardian website in regards to what's going on in the UK government. Now this is UK leader, Prime Minister Keir Starmer, and he has been undergoing growing pressure from inside his own party. More than 70 Labour MPs are now urging him to resign or to set out a clear timetable for when he will step aside. Now this video shows Starmer yesterday vowing to provide support for him and to prove doubters wrong as he seeks to avert leadership challenge. And that was the video that he was speaking to his fellow peers at a Labour media conference yesterday on this particular subject. Now, senior cabinet ministers, including the Home Secretary Shabana Mahmood, are reported to be among those demanding clarity over his future. Now, Downing Street has also mentioned that it is something that they want to know what will happen in regards to what is going on there. Now, Starmer says he has no intention of stepping down. He warns Labour would descend into chaos if it opened another leadership contest, and insists he still plans to lead the party forward. We know that there's been 6 ministerial aides that has actually stepped down. They're all in supporting roles. So no cabinet leaders have left, but a number of supporting staff have left the Labour Parliament, the Labour Party, due to the election results, the council election results, which actually went away from Labour in relation to their favourability and their populism in regards to going over to the Reform Party, which is the UK's right-wing party, and a number of other parties as well. It's been quite a devastating defeat for Labour in the local council elections, which is why there is a call for leadership change. Now let's go to the New York Times and their headline, which is also following on from our top story in regards to Trump and Iran. And what we know is that US President Donald Trump says the ceasefire between Iran and the US is hanging by a thread. Now, he spoke on Monday. Trump said that the truce was on life support after he Iran's peace proposals. He also said that he was considering resorting to US Navy escorts for commercial ships passing through the Strait of Hormuz, which is still shut, even though there has been talks for it to be reopened. And there's some pictures here that you're seeing on screen of Iran's spokesperson talking there. Now, Iran's response to the blockade, the vital shipping lane, has been one of retaliation because the US has blocked Iran's ports. Most recently, as the war continues on there, even though there is a ceasefire currently in place. Now, the latest tension follows Tehran's response to a US proposal aimed at curbing Iran's nuclear program, which is the main issue in all of this. It's something that Trump has wanted and says that this is something that Iran should not have, and therefore has rejected Iran's counteroffer, and also revealed that an earlier escort mission for oil tankers was stopped just after 2 days, partly because of opposition from Saudi Arabia in relation to that. Here's Trump just now talking in the Oval Office late yesterday evening in relation to what's going on with Iran, but it seems that talks are still at a standstill, but we'll keep you updated with how things progress and if we have any more further news or movement between the two leaders in those countries. Okay, now let's move over to the next headline, which is on Al Jazeera, and that's in regards to what the EU has currently done. So the European Union has agreed to sanction violent Israeli settlers in the occupied West Bank area, breaking years of political deadlock on the actual issue. So this is quite important information because the EU Foreign Policy Chief Kaja Kallas says violence and extremism carry consequences, and it's something they're now able to put in force. France says that this is something that the sanctions will target both organisations, so it will target organisations and individuals accused of backing extremist settler activity. Now, what is next in regards to that? The bloc is still divided over wide trade sanctions against Israel, and two high-profile Israeli ministers, Itamar Ben-Gvir and Bezalel Smotrich, are reportedly not included in these latest measures. Now, the breakthrough came after Hungary's new government. We know that Peter Major is now leading Hungary after Orban's defeat. He's been able to lift a veto that had blocked sanctions under the former Prime Minister Viktor Orban. So Israel's foreign minister has actually come out and condemned the move as politically motivated in relation to these EU sanctions. But we'll have more on this later on in the programme, so please stay tuned to that. Right now, let's move over to the next story, and that's on the BBC, and that's in relation to what's going on in South Africa. Now, South African President Cyril Ramaphosa says he will challenge in court in what he says is an impeachment that has been called on upon him. Now, I'm just going to get the details for you. That he's saying that it's a way of impeachment proceedings against him. Now, the case actually centres on the so-called Palafala scandal, and it involves the theft of large amounts of money, of cash that was hidden inside furniture at the president's private Garm fund. An independent panel previously had said that there was evidence suggesting possible misconduct in a way that Ramaphosa handled the matter, but he actually denies any wrongdoing and says the money came from a legitimate sale And South Africa's Constitutional Court has now ruled that Parliament should investigate the matter further through an impeachment inquiry. But it's something Ramaphosa says he will not resign and plans to fight these findings in court. So we'll definitely provide you with more information as to how things progress in relation to that. Now let's move over to another headline this morning, and that's on the Deutsche Welle website, and that's in relation to Eurovision. Now, we do have a news presenter, Katie Wilson, in Vienna covering this particular story and everything that's going on in Eurovision. So please make sure you stay tuned, as there's a number of things happening, especially for things relating to Azerbaijan. But I just wanted to focus your attention on the boycott that is happening around this. Now, the Eurovision Song Contest is facing fresh controversy because of this, with broadcasters in Spain, Ireland, Slovenia saying that they will boycott the 70th competition and refuse to air it on their television for their citizens. Now, this move follows continued criticism because of Israel's participation over the war in Gaza. Iceland and the Netherlands are also boycotting the competition itself, although both countries still plan to broadcast the event. And just to add there, that Slovenia says it will replace Eurovision coverage with programming focused on Palestinian voices. Ireland plans to air the Eurovision themed episode of Father Ted instead during Saturday's final, and Spain has said it will run its own musical special despite what's going on in the Eurovision Song Contest. Now, this dispute echoes earlier tensions at Eurovision, which also includes Russia's ban from the contest after the invasion of Ukraine in 2022. So that is what that is currently showing. So across the day, the picture is one of pressure and uncertainty. So just bringing this all together in the UK, you have Keir Starmer is fighting to hold off a leadership push. In Washington, Tehran, a fragile ceasefire appears to be continued strain as well. So this is just a quick roundup, and the EU is moving against violent settlers in the West Bank while divisions remain broader over action, and Eurovision is facing widening broadcaster boycott. And in South Africa, political questions are still unfolding in relation to Ramaphosa. Well, that's your press roundup for now. Now we'll take a short break, and when I return, I'll discuss the rest of the global stories. Don't go anywhere. Welcome back. You're watching Daybreak. Now let's have a look at the global stories. We head over to the UK, and Britain's political scene is under strain as Prime Minister Keir Starmer faces rising pressure within his own party. The unrest comes as senior figures raise concerns over his leadership following a series of recent political setbacks. Here's more.
British Prime Minister Keir Starmer is facing growing pressure from within the Labour Party, Britain's governing centre-left party, after around 70 Labour members of Parliament called for him to resign or urged him to announce when he plans to step down. Reports suggest splits are emerging inside Keir Starmer's cabinet, with some senior ministers privately supporting calls for a timetable for his departure, including Britain's Justice Secretary Shabana Mahmood, who privately urged Keir Starmer to consider setting a clear timetable for his departure from office. The backlash follows disappointing election results across several parts of the UK. In Wales, one of the four nations that make up the United Kingdom, Labour lost control of the Welsh Parliament in Wales, while in Scotland, the Scottish National Party secured a fifth consecutive term in power. Meanwhile, Nigel Farage and his Reform UK party have made significant gains in local elections, winning more than 1,400 council seats in England and increasing pressure on Labour's leadership direction. Starmer has not directly responded to resignation calls, but has acknowledged government mistakes while defending his long-term strategy. In an attempt to shift momentum, he announced plans to nationalise British steel after a failed private sale and signalled closer ties with the European Union following Brexit. The coming weeks will be decisive for Starmer as he tries to restore confidence in his leadership or faces growing calls from within Labour to step down.
EU foreign ministers have approved a new sanctions package targeting both violent Israeli settlers in the West Bank and senior Hamas leaders. The move, previously stalled for months, focuses on 3 individuals and 4 organizations following a surge in violence in the occupied territories. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has already slammed the decision, calling it an act of moral bankruptcy, while Hamas has so far issued no response. But announcing the breakthrough in Brussels, EU Foreign Policy Chief Kai Kallas emphasized that extremism will now face direct consequences.
But we have also seen the surge of settler violence in West Bank. Today, we reached a political agreement to sanction Israeli extremist settlers and entities. This goes together with new sanctions on leading Hamas figures. This means that we move from the political deadlock that was there for a long time. Violence and extremism carry consequences.
This year's Eurovision Song Contest is facing growing controversy, with several countries boycotting over the event over Israel's participation. Public broadcasters in Spain, Ireland and Slovenia say they will not air the competition, while Iceland and the Netherlands announced last year their refusal to take part. The controversy follows criticism of last year's public vote after reports claimed a campaign linked to Israel encouraged repeated voting for its entry. Organisers have since reduced the voting limit from 20 to 10 in an effort to protect the contest's integrity. Israel's participation remains a divisive issue, particularly after Russia was excluded from Eurovision following its invasion of Ukraine in 2022. Now, fighting has continued between Russia and Ukraine despite a US-mediated 3-day ceasefire, which came into effect on the 9th of May. Now, both sides accuse each other of violating the temporary pause in combat.
Russia and Ukraine have both reported continued fighting along the front line, despite a 3-day ceasefire brokered by the United States. The temporary truce, which began on Friday and runs until May 11th, was part of a wider push by US President Donald Trump to revive peace efforts after more than 4 years of war. But the ceasefire is already showing signs of strain. Ukraine says Russian forces continued assaults along parts of the front line, while Moscow accused Kyiv of thousands of violations since the truce came into effect. President Volodymyr Zelensky said there had been no silence along the front line, despite the ceasefire announcement.
There was no silence on the front line today. There were hostilities. We have documented all of this. We can also see that Russia has no intention of ending this war, and we are preparing for new attacks, unfortunately. But there must be peace. That is precisely what we are working towards. The defense of Ukraine, Ukraine's independence, and the safety of our people. These are the most important things.
Russia's defense ministry, meanwhile, said its forces were responding to Ukrainian artillery and drone attacks. Ukraine's military reported around 180 clashes along the front line over the past 24 hours, with Russian forces continuing drone and artillery strikes in several regions. Regional officials in Ukraine say at least 3 people were killed in attacks in the Zaporizhia and Kherson regions. The renewed fighting comes despite recent comments by Russian President Vladimir Putin suggesting the war may be entering its final phase. However, Kremlin officials have also cautioned that any future peace agreement would be a lengthy and complex process.
Staying on Ukraine, and Ukrainian anti-corruption agencies have issued an official notice of suspension to a former top government official as part of a high-profile graft probe. While authorities have not officially named the suspect, local media and sources identify him as Andrei Yermak, the powerful former chief of staff to President Zelensky. Yermak, who resigned late last year amid mounting pressure, is reportedly linked to a multi-million-dollar money laundering scheme involving luxury construction projects. NATO forces have tested an AI-assisted heavy lift drone designed to evacuate wounded soldiers directly from the battlefield. The exercise, held in Poland, involved Polish and American troops using the unmanned aircraft to simulate medical rescue operations. The drone, known as Flowcopter FC-100, can carry heavy loads of up to 6 hours and operate in difficult weather conditions. Military officials say the system could help reduce risks to soldiers during casualty evacuations, while also supporting frontline logistics and medical supply missions. The last remaining passengers have disembarked from the MV Hondius in Spain as health authorities continue a multinational operation to contain a deadly hantavirus outbreak linked to the luxury cruise ship. Here's more.
The final passengers and crew members have disembarked from the MV Hondius in Tenerife, marking the latest stage in a major international health operation following a deadly hantavirus outbreak on board. Spanish authorities say more than 90 passengers and crew have now been evacuated and repatriated after weeks at sea, while the vessel has departed for the Netherlands for full disinfection. The World Health Organization says 7 confirmed cases of the Andes strain of hantavirus have now been identified, alongside 2 additional suspected infections. The Andes strain is considered particularly concerning because, unlike most hantaviruses, it can spread between humans in limited circumstances. US health officials say 18 passengers from the ship have now been flown to the United States and placed under medical monitoring and quarantine. Most are being treated at specialized facilities in Nebraska, where 1 confirmed patient is being held in a biocontainment unit. Officials say the risk to the wider public remains low, noting that the virus does not spread easily and usually requires prolonged close contact. Health officials say the evacuation operation aimed to balance public safety with the well-being of passengers, many of whom had spent weeks isolated on board.
As you can imagine, there was even mental breakdown for some of the passengers. It's very difficult to stay for weeks in a small container. You can imagine how it affects mentally. And many of them are also senior citizens, and they have many chronic illnesses. And imagine carrying that for several weeks.
Authorities in several countries continue monitoring passengers under quarantine, including a Greek traveller transferred to a specialised isolation unit in Athens as a precaution. The World Health Organization says the overall public risk remains low, while investigations and contact tracing continue.
Now turning to South Asia, and Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi will begin a 5-nation tour this week as rising energy prices place growing pressure on India's economy. According to its foreign ministry, Modi will travel to the UAE, the Netherlands, Sweden, Norway and Italy this month. The visit comes as the Middle East crisis drives up global oil prices, increasing concerns over inflation and India's foreign currency reserves. Officials say talks in the UAE will focus heavily on energy cooperation and regional security. The European leg of the trip is expected to centre on trade and investment ties following the recent India-EU trade agreement. Now, global attention is turning to high-level talks between the US and China as both sides attempt to stabilise relations following months of economic and geopolitical tensions. Leaders are expected to focus on trade, cooperation and key international security concerns.
US President Donald Trump is set to visit China this week for high-level talks with Chinese President Xi Jinping, marking the first in-person summit between the two leaders in over 6 months. Discussions are expected to focus on trade, artificial intelligence, Taiwan, Iran, rare earth supply chains, and the overall geopolitical tensions as both sides seek to stabilize increasingly strained bilateral ties. The visit comes during a fragile trade truce following months of tariff disputes and export restrictions between Washington and Beijing. US officials say that the two countries are exploring mechanisms for deeper economic coordination, including a possible Board of Trade and Investment Forum, while China is expected to announce additional purchases of American goods, including aircraft and agricultural products. Regional security concerns are also expected to dominate the summit agenda, especially tensions surrounding Taiwan and the Middle East. Washington is reportedly seeking greater Chinese pressure on Iran following recent regional instability, while Beijing is expected to push back against US support for Taiwan and growing American restrictions on Chinese technology development. Analysts say that the meeting is aimed more at preventing further deterioration in relations rather than achieving a major breakthrough. Manu Makhtoum, A News, Beijing.
Turning to South America, and a suspected gas explosion triggered a major fire in Sao Paulo, Brazil's largest city, on Monday, leaving one person dead and 3 others injured. The blast ripped through a neighborhood around 16 kilometers away from the city center, destroying or damaging roughly 10 homes, according to the fire department. Emergency crews deployed multiple fire engines and continued searching through rubble, with officials saying a gas leak, likely from liquefied petroleum gas, may have caused the explosion. Now turning to the continent of Africa, and its film industry took to center stage in Nigeria, Lagos, as actors, filmmakers and producers gathered for the 12th edition of the Africa Magic Viewers' Choice Awards, celebrating achievements in cinema and television across the continent. Let's take a look.
Africa's film industry was in focus in Lagos as actors, filmmakers and producers gathered for the 12th edition of the Africa Magic Viewers' Choice Awards, recognizing achievements across film and television. Awards were presented in 32 categories, covering acting, directing and technical production, with some of the continent's biggest stars attending the ceremony. Nigerian actor Uzo Arukwe won Best Actor in a Leading Role for Colors of Fire.
We started on a very small scale, but today you take a flight from Washington, D.C., you can watch all Nigerian movie for the next 12 hours, 13 hours. And there will be good movies that will teach you lessons and show you that there's been an upgrade in our innovations, technology, and so on. So kudos to Africa, kudos to everybody who has engineered this process.
While Linda Ejiofor received the award for Best Actress in a Leading Role for The Serpent's Gift. Cameroon also secured its first AMVCA win in the Best Indigenous Film category for Central Africa, with director Kang Quintus's film Mabanda. Organisers said this year's nominations reflected wider participation from across the continent, as African productions continue expanding their global audience.
The AMVCA is always a defining moment. We keep saying it's a full circle moment, and we're celebrating the craft. There's so much energy. But for this year, what is so special is we're taking bolder stories, right? We're going with more nominations, and we see a lot of nominations across Africa. So we keep saying the AMVCA is not about Nigeria, it's about Africa. With the nominations across Africa, it gives us the skill. We do want to take African story to the globe. And the way we can do that is more nominations coming through from the different countries in Africa so that we can authentically tell African story in a confident way.
Industry executives said production quality and international visibility for African-made content have continued to grow in recent years.
African content is improving year after year. If you think about it, it has been the case in Turkey, it has been the case in Korea, in Brazil, in some part of Europe. You know, it takes some time to be uplifting. What I hope is like we can see that the level of production now is allowing African content to be told to the world.
The ceremony also honoured veteran figures in the industry and featured a red carpet event attended by actors, filmmakers and media personalities from across Africa.
Those outfits look amazing. I mean, goodness, some of those are very creative. Now let's take a quick break. When I return, we'll take a look at the regional headlines and I'll be joined by a guest to dig further into some of those key stories. Don't go anywhere. Welcome back and thank you for joining me this morning. Now let's go to the stories in the region, and we actually are going to go to Vienna, which is in Europe. That's only because of what's taking place, because an Azerbaijani cultural festival event is bringing together music and tradition ahead of the Eurovision Song Contest semi-final. Our presenter Katie Wilson has more details.
This might look like Baku right behind me now, but actually we're still in Vienna. We're here at the Azerbaijani Cultural Center for a night of Azerbaijani music and celebrating Azerbaijani culture. Of course, it's all ahead of Eurovision, which is hosted here in the Austrian capital. So tonight is about celebrating Azerbaijani music with a touch of Mozart. Right here at the piano, we heard a piece called Mozart in Baku, a nice little mix of both cultures there. And that's what this evening is about, celebrating not only Azerbaijani culture, but Azerbaijani diaspora in Austria. Of course, this is all ahead of Jiva's semi-final at Eurovision, which will take place on Thursday. And we've been speaking to her ahead of her performance and about what she thinks of not only this evening, but her chances in Vienna.
I'm so proud that I'm here. So for me, I want to do a good performance, a best performance, and to be in touch everybody's heart, and do my beautiful music. And I'm not thinking about qualified or not qualified.
It's about the music.
Yes, it's about music and performance at this big stage, and this is my time.
Well, for every Azerbaijani, Eurovision Song Contest is something that is very close to our hearts, because we also host the Eurovision Song Contest in Baku before, and it was one of the most successful Eurovision events, concerts, I would say. I was there, I was just 12 years old, but the emotion stays all the way. And this is something unforgettable, and we wanted to be part of this unforgettable event, unforgettable song contest, and to invite our delegation, to invite other delegations here, and to welcome everyone here, as this is part of Azerbaijan, we believe, and we try to show the beauty, the cultural feeling of Azerbaijan.
Participation of Azerbaijan with such a renowned singer, with such a beautiful song is actually a reflection of what Azerbaijan is today. Nation which is proud of its past and looking into a future. And what you, the glimpse of what you have seen today, the performance, is actually representing the best of Azerbaijan's talent, and of course we already can be proud of participation of our singer at the Eurovision Song Contest.
They look very energetic. I'll definitely be rooting for Azerbaijan in the Eurovision Song Contest, so I hope they do fantastically well there. Now let's move over to Turkey, and the Turkish president has held a meeting with Belgium's Queen Mathilde in Istanbul. It's part of an ongoing Belgian economic mission to Turkey, focus on expansion, trade and investment. Our correspondent Adam Morrow has more from Turkey.
Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan on Monday met Belgium's Queen Mathilde in Istanbul in a visit focused largely on trade, investment, and broader cooperation between the two countries. The closed-door meeting took place as part of a landmark Belgian economic mission to Turkey, which also aims to strengthen ties between Brussels and Ankara. The Queen arrived in Turkey on Sunday at the head of a high-level delegation that includes Belgian Foreign Minister Maxime Prévost and Defense Minister Theo Franken, who also holds the foreign trade portfolio. More than 400 Belgian business leaders, academics, and policymakers are also taking part in the mission. Earlier Monday, Turkey and Belgium inked an agreement to step up bilateral trade relations, which was signed by Prévost, Franken, and Turkish Trade Minister Omar Bolat. Speaking at the signing ceremony, Prévost emphasized that the Queen's participation served to underline the importance Brussels attaches to its relationship with Turkey. Bolat, for his part, called for Belgian support in expanding the Turkey-EU customs union, which in its current form only covers industrial goods and processed agricultural products. A Turkey-Belgium economic forum is slated for Wednesday, where further agreements are expected, including some in the fields of defense and aviation. The mission also serves to highlight the importance of Belgium's sizable Turkish community, estimated at around 400,000 people, which has traditionally served as a bridge between the two countries. Belgium is also significant for Ankara because Brussels is home to the headquarters of both the European Union and the NATO alliance. For Turkey, which is both a NATO member and an EU candidate country, the visit is about more than just trade. It's also about deeper strategic engagement with Europe. This is Adam Maro for A News in Istanbul, Turkey.
Staying on this important topic, and President Recep Tayyip Erdogan stated that the time had also come for Turkey-EU relations to be upgraded in line with new realities, with particular emphasis on modernization of the customs union and the broader intensification of ties between Ankara and Brussels. Joining me now is Akbar Novruz, geopolitical analyst in Baku. Welcome to the program.
Thank you so much for the invitation. I'm pleasure.
No problem. So my first question in this is, President Erdogan has said that Turkey and EU relations should be upgraded in line with current conditions. In practical terms, what exactly needs to be modernized, do you think?
Well, the customs unions agreement has been in effect since 1996, and the trade levels, the numbers statistically has been amounted to 210 billion euros. And Turkey is, of course, the fifth largest partner of the European Union. But the issue regarding the establishment of this customs unions agreement and the further enhancement is related with the common external tariff that Turkey is applying. But this is not related with Turkey, it's more related with the European Union itself. Because whenever the European Union actually signs a trade deal, for example, let's give reference to the recent ones with India, Mercosur countries, and Singapore. Turkey actually applies the EU's common external tariff to a third country. So those countries' goods gain potential access to Turkish markets as well. So the third country gets more benefit rather than the Turkish companies. So the economic relations and the export opportunities do not correspondingly increase. This is more of a one-sided relationship in terms of the economic side. But perhaps this is a problem and an issue that has been recognized by both sides back in 2016. And one of the main things I personally think the economics part is, of course, at that side, and the other main problem is the politics part that I would like to explain if this is more of an interested topic.
Yes, we'll go through that in just a moment. I wanted just to bring it back to how realistic then is, or is meaningful progress at this stage if the changes were to be actioned. Could it be actioned? How would this look like?
Now, given that fact and saying that, of course, the economic problems, the issues are not more of a problem. This is like the slightest things that could actually be resolved. European Union must certainly be looking forward to having a reasoning between Cyprus, Greece, and Turkey, because as of February, according to the Turkish minister, Mustafa Bolat, he actually said that the 15 of the 29 technical matters included between the high dialogue talks has been resolved. But Cyprus and Greece having respectively a access to European Union, they have a veto power as well. So whenever any sort of enhancement between a European Union and Turkey, they actually make an obstacle. So this kind of obstacle is more related with a political issue rather than an economic issue. Perhaps this potential is needed to be enhanced. The European Union is looking forward to enhancing this as well, because this full modernization could actually add up to the around 2.5, maybe 3% of the Turkey's GDP and 25 billion euros to European Union's trade volume over the next 3 or 4 years. The numbers could actually increase if the modernization actually happens at a more high speed. So I would say the business lobbies are actually interested in that matter. The improvement most certainly can happen. And we should actually add in the fact that this is more of this agreement actually covers the areas among the industrial goods. And if, as you have mentioned in your bulletin as well, if they're actually looking forward to enhancing this in the defense products as well, given the fact that European Union is looking forward to having a new bloc, something alternative to NATO, both sides most certainly can actually benefit from this. But of course, the main problem, in my opinion, is the political issues regarding the relationship between Cyprus, Greece and Turkey.
Right. Well, that's quite interesting. And just to kind of put it in perspective as well, taking it into a different direction, Turkey remains an official candidate for membership of the European Union. But beyond the customs union and closer political dialogue, what developments would be required to make that prospect of ascension more realistic over time?
Well, perhaps one of the, as I said, the common external tariff could be applied to Turkish companies as well, where both companies, and I'm talking about the relationship between the European Union and an enhancement of this relationship, where Turkish companies gain easier access to European market, and the third countries where, as European Union signs FTAs, the trade agreements with other countries and other nations, where Turkish companies can actually benefit from that as well. So in that idea, I personally think this could actually benefit Turkey, European Union, and all the countries involved. And if that happens, perhaps the accession to European Union could possibly even faster, because the European Union itself, of course, there is lots of regulations to be the member of European Union. But in my opinion as well, Turkey as a site is more of the relationship has been hot and cold approach. But I personally have a huge optimistic view in this terms, because the significance of Turkey is, of course, high, and the European Union most certainly is looking forward of accession, at least more close relationship with Turkey that could benefit European Union and Turkey as well. So yes, the optimistic view is this will happen most certainly in the near future.
Okay, well, the European Commission recently caused a bit of controversy by placing Turkey alongside Russia and China as a source of external influence from which Europe should protect itself, which prompted a lot of criticism. Does that actually reveal a deeper divide between Turkey and parts of the EU establishment when it comes to values and Europe's long-term geopolitical direction?
Well, of course, Turkey has a geopolitical leverage because among all the European nations, Turkey has the ability to maneuver towards European Union, and the relationship between Russia and Ukraine is actually quite good on Turkish side. So probably over the course of 2 months, if I'm not mistaken, in July, there will be a leader summit of NATO countries. This will happen since 2004. This will be happening in Turkey. Perhaps European countries are looking forward to geopolitical leverage. There is nothing, in my opinion, to be upset about this. Of course, the geopolitical leverage of Turkey is significant, as I said, in terms of not only political side, but also the economic side. And Turkey will host COP31, the 31st summit of COP at the end of the year. So that means that over the course of this year, Turkey will be the main focus of this political and geopolitical aspects. And I personally think Turkey could actually maneuver towards this, and the relationship between Russia and Ukraine does not actually give any sort of reasoning towards European Union to use that, because this is actually essential for European Union to have a good relationship with Russia and Ukraine, so that they could actually use this in terms of benefiting from this relationship as well in the near future, of course, if the peace deal signs.
Yeah. Yes, and just quickly, Armenia has recently reaffirmed its European aspirations. We know that a number of EU leaders were in Armenia last week for their forum there and their summit. But any meaningful integration that Armenia has is actually in regards to how it depends basically on open borders through Turkey. Does this mean that progress in Turkish-Armenian normalization could advance Armenia's European prospects whilst also strengthening Turkey's own strategic case within Europe?
Well, of course, I think Armenia being a landlocked country, ever since its independence, of course, regarded with the conflict issues, because Armenia faced these consequences because of the conflict in Karabakh between Azerbaijan, and this actually meant that the trade relationship between Turkey, Azerbaijan has been suspended ever since. So as the peace agreement looks positive, most certainly Armenia is looking forward to benefiting its country and increasing the potential of its country and economic potential further in the future. And Armenian side, of course, is the one most interested in this regard as well. Turkish companies are most certainly be interested because this is a new market that hasn't been touched more than 3 decades. So European Union most certainly be pushing both Armenia and Turkey in terms of having a resolution between one another. And of course, at the end of the day, this would predominantly depends on the peace agreement, how the relationship between Azerbaijan is going, because given the fact that Azerbaijan and Turkey is close allies. So if Armenia, of course, understands this and the peace agreement goes as it stands, European Union most certainly be having any sort of improving relations and improving any sort of economic relations between Turkey and Armenia, and possibly with Georgia and Azerbaijan as well, because Azerbaijan is one of the main countries that is transporting gas and oil with using Turkey as well. So this actually adds another route. And I personally look optimistic, and probably the European Union will push towards this in the next, let's say, upcoming months.
Okay, wow. So thank you so much for all your insights in that and for joining me this morning, Mr. Nofrous, on your in-depth conversation on this particular topic. Thank you.
Thank you as well. Thank you for the invitation.
Now we turn over to Afghanistan, and Azerbaijan are deepening its economic ties through a new agreement. Our correspondent, Tamim Bahis, has more of the details.
Afghanistan has signed a new gold mining contract with Afghan and Azerbaijani companies worth more than $20 million. The Ministry of Mines and Petroleum says the 5-year deal covers a gold mine in Kalazal district of northern Kunduz province. The agreement was signed here in Kabul by the Minister of Mines and Petroleum, Hidayatullah Badri, with Subhan Moment Company and Azerbaijan's Reef Group LLC. Officials say the mine covers an area of about 6 square kilometers, with a total planned investment of over $20 million. Under the deal, the companies are expected to pay a 30% royalty to Afghan authorities. The Ministry of Mines says the companies will invest $200,000 in social services and create around 100 direct and indirect jobs. The signing ceremony was attended by the ambassador of Azerbaijan in Kabul. He welcomed the agreement and said Azerbaijani companies were interested in further investment in Afghanistan's mining sector. Minister Badri described the contract as a positive step toward strengthening economic relations between Afghanistan and Azerbaijan. The deal comes as Afghanistan seeks more foreign investment in mining and infrastructure, while Azerbaijan shows growing interest in the country's mineral, trade and transit sectors. The Kunduz gold contract is therefore being seen not only as a mining agreement but also as part of efforts to deepen Afghanistan's economic ties with regional partners, including Azerbaijan. Tamim Bahis in Kabul, A News.
It's time for a break. When I come back, I'll have a full update on the latest headlines, plus a look at what's making the front pages this morning. Don't go anywhere. Hello, you're watching Daybreak live on A News, and if you're just joining me, I'm your host Nadia Gyane, here to take you through the day's top stories. So let's take a look at the morning headlines. US President Donald Trump says Iran's ceasefire is on a massive life support line after Washington rejected Tehran's deal. UK leader Keir Starmer has been urged to leave after a number of calls from its cabinet. And the last passengers leave Hunter virus-hit ship as the virus continues to make its waves throughout the passage. Now let's take a look at the stories making its way across the globe this morning. And we head over to our first story in relation to what's happening over in the Hunter virus on CNN. And the latest information is that the last passengers have now left the Hunter virus cruise ship, as authorities now confirmed new positive cases linked to the outbreak. Now, what we do know is that the MV Hondius left Tenerife for the Netherlands on Monday after its final passengers got off, and then 3 passengers have died after travelling on the ship. 2 have confirmed that they had symptoms as well in relation to that. Now, authorities say an American and a French national who had already returned home had also tested in relation to that and tested positive. Now, the WHO says that 7 cases linked to the ship are confirmed, with 2 more also. Just making sure I've got this information right. 2 more suspected. Spain says a passenger quarantining in Madrid has also provisionally been tested as well. Well, what happens next? US officials and a number of officials across the world, because this is actually impacting a number of individuals coming onto this ship from different countries, saying that they've been repatriated and showing mild symptoms as well. Now, both travellers travelled home in a biocontaminant unit. Now, that was from the cruise ship to America. Now, France is saying that a woman is isolating in Paris and her conditioning is actually worsening. Now, and also in regards to that, 2 British nationals with confirmed cases are currently being treated as well in the Netherlands and South Africa. Now, the Hunter virus is actually caused and carried out by rodents, but the WHO says human transmission of the Andes strain is possible. Symptoms often include a fever, fatigue, muscle aches, stomach pain, and shortness of breath. And finally, officials say that the risk of a major outbreak still remains very, very low. But that is the current information on that. Now let's head over to our next story, and that's actually on the BBC, and that's in relation to what's going on in the UK right now. So UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer, who you can see on the screen, is undergoing growing pressure from inside his own party. Now, in relation to this particular story, he has been warned of wanting to step down. More than 70 Labour MPs are now urging for him to resign or to set out a clear timetable for when he is likely to step aside. Senior cabinet ministers, including the UK's Home Secretary Shabana Mahmood, are actually reporting to be one of those demanding clarity over his future. Now, the government has also replaced 6 ministerial aides after they resigned in relation to this, and has called for a public resignation of Keir Starmer. Now, what's next in relation to that? Keir Starmer says that he has no intention of stepping down, and actually warns Labour would descend into chaos if it opened another leadership contest, and insists he still plans to lead the party forward. We'll provide you with more information as we get it throughout the course of the day if something drastic does happen and he does decide to resign, but you can never tell, so we will keep you abreast of the information. Now let's turn over to the New York Times website and what's going on in relation to the US and Iran. only because it's our leading story, and US President Donald Trump says that the ceasefire between Iran and the US is hanging by a thread. It's very much in a fragile state at the current moment, and it's after the US rejected latest peace proposals. Now, we know that Trump says that he is considering restoring US Navy escorts for commercial ships passing through the Strait of Hormuz in response to Iran's blockade of vital shipping lane in relation to what's currently happening. And he's not happy with Iran's response to setting aside their uranium program, which is the main cause of concern when it comes to negotiations. Now, the latest tension between this follows Tehran's response to the US proposal aimed at curbing Iran's nuclear program, as I mentioned, easing tensions, and Trump has rejected their counter-offer and also revealed that an earlier escort mission for oil tankers was stopped after just 2 days, and that's partly because of Saudi Arabia's opposition to that, saying that it's not something that they wanted, and they wanted to make sure that this would only aggravate the situation even more. But that's the information that we have. We have more details. So let's go over to our news report for more information on this top story.
A new diplomatic crisis is unfolding between the United States and Iran after President Donald Trump warned that efforts to secure a ceasefire are now hanging by a thread. From the Oval Office, Trump delivered some of his strongest remarks yet against Tehran, describing Iran's latest response to Washington's peace proposal as garbage and signaling a return to a maximum pressure campaign.
It's unbelievably weak, I would say. I would call it the weakest right now. After reading that piece of garbage they sent us, I didn't even finish reading it. They said, I'm not going to waste my time reading it. I would say it's one of the weakest right now. It's on life support. They understand these are all medical people. Dr. Oz, life support is not a good thing. Do you agree?
Bad prognostic.
I would say the ceasefire is on massive life support, where the doctor walks in and says, sir, your loved one has approximately a 1% chance of living.
Central to the deadlock remains Washington's demand for the total dismantling of Iran's nuclear infrastructure, a point the president insists is non-negotiable for global security.
Very simple. Iran cannot have a nuclear weapon. They can't have it. And if they did have it, the Middle East would be gone, Israel would be gone, and then hit Europe probably next. We're doing the service to the world.
In Tehran, the rhetoric is equally uncompromising. The Iranian Foreign Ministry maintains that its proposals are the only viable path to regional stability, accusing the US of being captive to Israeli interests.
Regrettably, the United States still insists on one-sided views and unreasonable demands, which are largely based on mindsets influenced by Israel.
As diplomacy falters, the US Treasury has announced fresh sanctions against 12 individuals and entities spanning Hong Kong, the UAE, and Oman. The move targets the IRGC's shadow fleet used to ship oil to China. Adding fuel to the fire, new reports suggest the conflict has already expanded. Investigative reports claim the UAE secretly struck an Iranian refinery on Levan Island in April, leading to massive Iranian retaliatory strikes on Emirati infrastructure. With tensions affecting maritime routes and US naval forces on alert, attention now turns to President Trump's upcoming meeting with Chinese leader Xi Jinping, where Washington is expected to press Beijing on energy ties with Tehran.
Staying on the topic of Iran and recent comments, US President Donald Trump has told reporters in the Oval Office that while the ceasefire remained in place, it was something that was still being looked upon. He said it is still unbelievably weak. Joining me now to further discuss this is Mohammad Mammadov. He's a research fellow at the Top Jabashov Center in Baku. Welcome to the program.
Good morning, thank you.
My first question in this is Trump's recent comments have been met with a curt reply from Iran's parliamentary speaker that's actually said Iran's armed forces were ready to respond and to teach a lesson of any aggression. What can we make from these two statements in relation to what Trump has said and what Iran has said and the current situation with the war in Iran at the moment?
Well, I think this is the key structural challenge from the beginning of the war, because since day one, the United States and Israel has been thinking that they are the winning side. And what we have been seeing from Trump's comments in recent days, it is seen that he is either ill-informed or misinformed, as the saying goes, about what are Iran's true capabilities or capacities and intention to engage its enemies on the battlefield. And the same, I think, is going on the Iranian side. They are also thinking then, from what Parliament Speaker Mr. Bagher Ghalibaf has been saying, that they are thinking that they have won the war. On the Iranian side, victory means survival. They have not been, the regime is still intact in Tehran. Rather than being weakened, they have consolidated their control, both in the neighborhood, they are still attacking their neighbors, and also in the domestic politics. The reformists are, almost out of the political scene in Iranian domestic politics. So Iranian leadership thinks that they are the winning this war. So why would you concede if both sides are thinking that they are the victorious side? So I think this is the main structural impediment that will in the end lead to the restoration of clash between Iran and the United States, probably in the coming days.
It's quite interesting that both sides feel that they are on the upper hand in regards to what's going on. But Trump has said he's not happy mostly with Tehran's proposal and wants to end their uranium enrichment program, which is really the sticking point to these negotiations. Do you think that is a realistic request coming from the US? Because there seems to be no forward motion on that particular subject.
If the last 39 days have been a guide, it seems that Trump is exaggerating the U.S. capabilities to pressure Iran, concede on ending enrichment on Iranian territory. So the Iranian side said that it's the clear red line from the first of the war that they will not end their nuclear program. Of course, they say that, yes, they are open to discussions, negotiations with the United States, on some such kind of a formula like the 2015 JCPOA agreement, some kind of local enrichment with very low percentage, 3.36%. And they will not give the highly enriched uranium stockpile of 400 kilograms, so which Iran can use to make nuclear weapons soon. So on both fronts, Tehran saying that they will not concede. And the Trump's rationale is that still, through pressures, either through military attacks or blockade or, different maximum pressure mechanism that he said that he will restore, they can achieve Iran, make concessions on that front. But what we have seen in the last 2 months is that they will not make concessions on that front, because it's the cornerstone of the regime's ideology. If they make concessions on that front, it means the end of the regime. So they will not concede, probably.
Okay, so it's a very big stronghold that they have in relation to sticking with their uranium enrichment program, regardless of how the US may see that. If that is the case, then what is the US strategy towards this, as negotiations still seem to be at a standstill? There's been no meetings scheduled. There's nothing going ahead in Islamabad or in any other country at the moment. What do you think is the US strategy now?
It's very unclear. I think Trump administration still does not have a clear strategy on how to move on. As you see, he is vacillating between diplomacy and full-scale attack on Iranian territory. So again, from day one of the war. So Trump has two options. Either he goes all the way in and attacking civilian infrastructure, because either way he did not achieve his goals on nuclear issue, and submit Iran to his demands. He had to do it. Otherwise, he has to go for negotiations and make concessions on the nuclear file that agrees to Iranian local enrichment. There is now a third option.
Wow, so it's a very hard sticking point. Only also in relation to that, we've got Israel in the background saying, coming from Benjamin Netanyahu, saying that the war isn't over until there is no more uranium in sight, especially in relation to what Iran has. Do you think that's also a pulling mechanism for the US to kind of concede to pressure that's coming from Israel? Or do you think that actually the US government might be able to change its tactic and look at something else as a negotiation tool if they can't stop Iran from having some form of nuclear powers?
I think they will, in this or that way, in the end, go for something like GCPOA. I mean, reformulated. But if you ask me, current context, right now, I think about the negotiations, Israeli and American motivations are different. The United States right now thinks more about the opening of the Strait of Hormuz because it directly hurts American interests, both in domestic politics, there are elections soon, and international arena. Right now, Trump is preparing to go to China. He wants to go there with strong hand, but it is highly unlikely. But on the Israeli side, they are thinking about a nuclear file. Israel doesn't want Iran with nuclear weapons. But moreover, they also are unhappy that right now negotiations do not include Iranian concessions on ballistic missiles and Tehran supported proxies in the Middle East. As you know, Iran's major precondition for restarting the negotiations is that this war should stop in all fronts. That means Lebanon. And right now, the clash between Hezbollah and Israel is continuing in the southern Lebanon. So in that regard, Israel and American motivations are different, and I think that it will also somehow affect Trump's calculations about pressuring Iran on the nuclear issue. Because right now, again, priority is Strait of Hormuz.
Yes, exactly. Getting as much oil out and making sure that those global prices come down. Now, let's just talk about what you mentioned in relation to Trump now going over to China to meet with its leader, Xi Jinping. Now, it's quite a big meeting. He postponed it because of the attacks that was issued by the US in Iran. Now he's going to be there Wednesday evening into Thursday. What do those talks look like? We know that China is a big exporter of oil through the Strait of Hormuz and that has stopped since the war began. How can these two leaders come together? Do you think there could be some form of negotiation on China's part to help reopen the Strait of Hormuz, or actually bring these two sides to some form of truce?
No, of course. I think that China will think more about how they can pressure the Trump administration to make concessions on the Taiwan issue, because from looking from the Chinese perspective, I mean, their vital interests lie in the South China Sea, and they have some tensions with the United States about Taiwan. And I'm pretty sure that Xi Jinping will try to do his best to receive concessions from the American side on the Taiwan issue. That's the main precondition. But on the other side, I think this situation ongoing around the Hormuz, China is, yes, facing pressure, but China is also one of the main winners from this war. So yes, China is interested in stability around in the Middle East because its major oil exporter are located in that region. But China has huge oil petroleum reserves, strategic reserves that can make it wait for some time. At the same time, very fast electrification in the Chinese energy markets give Beijing some permissive environment, to play the long game here. So for China, I think that the main picture is that the United States is the main loser from this ongoing war with Iran. So they can wait some time and in the end leverage their diplomatic positioning and economic clout to bring Iran and the Gulf states together and make some kind of a mediator role they did in March 2023 between Iran and Saudi Arabia. So I think they are mostly in waiting mode now and waiting and seeing the United States getting sucked in this war and get weaker and weaker. So it diverted its attention away from Taiwan and the South China Sea.
Yes, no, it's so interesting. And very, very quickly, I only have like a minute. The Gulf states have been very much impacted by all of this. Why have they been sidelined in the negotiations? If you can just give me a very rough, quick minute response to that.
Well, I think it's all about the Trump administration's way of doing negotiations. They don't take these countries seriously, so it is very openly seen how they have been using their territory and does not caring about if Iran retaliating against those territories. Because in the end, these countries have been hit by Iran rather than the U.S. Most even Israel. So in this is the way Trump is negotiating. It's mostly about the U.S. ignoring, their agency in this situation.
Right. Well, thank you so much, Mr. Mammadov, for your insights there. They've been very helpful. I'm sure we'll be looking closely as to how the China and US talks go in the week.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you. Right, we head over to the UK, and Britain's political scene is under strain as Prime Minister Keir Starmer faces rising pressure within his own party. The unrest comes as senior figures raise concerns over his leadership following a series of recent political setbacks. Here's more on that story.
British Prime Minister Keir Starmer is facing growing pressure from within the Labour Party, Britain's governing centre-left party, after around 70 Labour members of Parliament called for him to resign or urged him to announce when he plans to step down. Reports suggest splits are emerging inside Keir Starmer's cabinet, with some senior ministers privately supporting calls for a timetable for his departure, including Britain's Justice Secretary Shabana Mahmood, who privately urged Keir Starmer to consider setting a clear timetable for his departure from office. The backlash follows disappointing election results across several parts of the UK. In Wales, one of the 4 nations that make up the United Kingdom, Labour lost control of the Welsh Parliament in Wales, while in Scotland, the Scottish National Party secured a 5th consecutive term in power. Meanwhile, Nigel Farage and his Reform UK party have made significant gains in local elections, winning more than 1,400 council seats in England and increasing pressure on Labour's leadership direction. Starmer has not directly responded to resignation calls, but has acknowledged government mistakes while defending his long-term strategy. In an attempt to shift momentum, he announced plans to nationalise British steel after a failed private sale and signalled closer ties with the European Union following Brexit. The coming weeks will be decisive for Starmer as he tries to restore confidence in his leadership or faces growing calls from within Labour to step down.
European Union foreign ministers have approved a new sanctions package targeting both violent Israeli settlers in the West Bank and senior Hamas leaders. The move, previously stalled for months, focuses on 3 individuals and 4 organizations following a surge in violence in the occupied territories. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has already slammed the decision, calling it an act of moral bankruptcy, while Hamas has so far issued no response. But announcing the breakthrough in Brussels, EU Foreign Policy Chief Kaja Kallas emphasized that extremism will now face direct consequences.
But we have also seen the surge of settler violence in West Bank. Today, we reached a political agreement to sanction Israeli extremist settlers and entities. This goes together with new sanctions on leading Hamas figures. This means that we move from the political deadlock that was there for a long time. Violence and extremism carry consequences.
The last remaining passengers have disembarked from the MV Hondias in Spain as health authorities continue a multinational operation to contain a deadly hantavirus outbreak linked to the luxury cruise ship. Let's take a look at that report.
The final passengers and crew members have disembarked from the MV Hondias in Tenerife, marking the latest stage in a major international health operation following a deadly hantavirus outbreak on board. Spanish authorities say more than 90 passengers and crew have now been evacuated and repatriated after weeks at sea, while the vessel has departed for the Netherlands for full disinfection. The World Health Organization says 7 confirmed cases of the Andes strain of hantavirus have now been identified, alongside 2 additional suspected infections. The Andes strain is considered particularly concerning because, unlike most hantaviruses, it can spread between humans in limited circumstances. US health officials say 18 passengers from the ship have now been flown to the United States and placed under medical monitoring and quarantine. Most are being treated at specialized facilities in Nebraska, where 1 confirmed patient is being held in a biocontainment unit. Officials say the risk to the wider public remains low, noting that the virus does not spread easily and usually requires prolonged close contact. Health officials say the evacuation operation aimed to balance public safety with the well-being of passengers, many of whom had spent weeks isolated on board.
As you can imagine, there was even mental breakdown for some of the passengers. It's very difficult to stay for weeks in a small container. You can imagine how it affects mentally. And many of them are also senior citizens, and they have many chronic illnesses. And imagine carrying that for several weeks.
Authorities in several countries continue monitoring passengers under quarantine, including a Greek traveller transferred to a specialised isolation unit in Athens as a precaution. The World Health Organization says the overall public risk remains low, while investigations and contact tracing continue.
A nationwide strike disrupted Bolivia on Monday, with dozens of roadblocks reported across the country as protests intensified against President Rodrigo Paz. Authorities say around 38 blockade points were in place by midday as unions and indigenous groups joined the action. The walkout, driven by demands for higher wages and improved fuel supplies, has since widened, spreading to major cities including La Paz and El Hato. The government, including ministers, is urging calm and dialogue, but officials have accused allies of former President Evo Morales of fueling the unrest. Morales has also called for a protest march towards the capital in the coming days. EU foreign ministers meeting in Brussels have set out a wide-ranging foreign policy agenda covering multiple global flashpoints and signalling new diplomatic moves across several regions. Our correspondent Anita Sharma has more from the Netherlands.
Welcome to This Day in Europe, where EU foreign ministers in Brussels broaden the security agenda from Ukraine and the Balkans to the Middle East and Syria. The Foreign Affairs Council agreed to deepen cooperation with the Western Balkans by stepping up support against hybrid threats and disinformation, while beginning discussions on a successor to High Representative Christian Schmidt in Bosnia and Herzegovina to keep the country on its EU path. But Ukraine remained central to the talks, with ministers strengthening the EU advisory mission and advancing work on possible EU security guarantees in the event of a truce, including expanding the EU Satellite Centre's role in ceasefire monitoring and countering sanctions evasion. The EU's foreign policy chief confirmed new sanctions to cut the Kremlin's revenue streams, along with 23 new listings targeting individuals linked to the deportation of Ukrainian children. The bloc will formally join the Special Tribunal for the Crime of Aggression later this week, while accession talks with Kyiv continue to advance. Kaja Kallas said getting Ukraine into the EU is not charity, but an investment into their security, and that Ukraine's European future is more important to the EU than the destruction of Ukraine is to Russia. In the Middle East, there will be deeper coordination with Gulf partners, with the EU expanding sanctions on Iran and reinforcing Operation Aspides, the naval mission protecting Red Sea shipping routes. Ministers also reached a political agreement to sanction extremist Israeli settlers and entities alongside leading Hamas figures, breaking a long-running EU deadlock. On Syria, ministers agreed to fully restore the EU's cooperation agreement, ending suspensions imposed under the Assad regime and signaling a broader regional reset. Canada's Foreign Affairs Minister Anita Anand was in Brussels as well, with Kallas describing the nation as, quote, the most European of all non-European countries. For A News, I'm Anita Sharma in Arnhem, Netherlands.
Now let's turn over to the UK, and Britain's King Charles and Queen Camilla were joined by Hollywood stars and musicians for the 50th anniversary of the monarch's youth charity. George Clooney and his wife Amal, that you can see there, was attending the King's Trust celebration at the Royal Albert Hall on Monday night with Benedict Cumberbatch as well, which will come up on screen, as well as actor David Oyelowo and Sir Idris Elba, the two of them having a bit of a chinwag right there. They were also joined by, along with Rita Ora and Rolling Stones star Ronnie Wood and Sir Rod Stewart were among those performing, making 5 decades of the organisation. There we are. There we can see Rita Ora there being speaking to King Charles, and then we see Rod Stewart there, and beside him is also Ringo Starr there just beside him. Now, King Charles founded the trust in 1976 when he was the Prince of Wales, with the aim to end youth unemployment. Well, that's your news for this morning. Thank you so much for joining me. Make sure you stay tuned to A News for further updates throughout the day, and I'll be back tomorrow to provide you with the latest headlines. Don't go anywhere.